light's always shining between all the fear and doubt.
The Tangents are a multinational prog rock band who were formed in 2002 to make one album. At that point, they were Reinstolt Zoltan Sorts, I'm pronouncing that wrong almost certainly, and Jonas Reingold of the Flower Kings, and Guy Manning, Andy Tillison, and Sam Bain of Parallel or 90 Degrees, with the addition of the iconic David Jackson from Van der Graaf Generator. They didn't settle at one album, and in fact, two albums in. Reinstolt left to focus on the Flower Kings, and Andy Tillison kind of took the lead here, or Andy Tillison Disc Drive, as he sometimes goes by. They've had a revolving cast of musicians, and quite an impressive number of previous musicians in the list. Except for Jonas Reingold and Andy Tillison, who have stayed pretty much constant, I believe. And this is especially impressive with Jonas, who has managed to maintain a career in the Flower Kings and in the Tangent and his own band, Car Mechanic, and guest plays all over the place. They have released somewhere in the order of 12 albums. Hi, my name's Dan. So this is possibly the 12th studio album by The Tangent, depending on how you count them, because some of the albums that they release are kind of not official albums, but yeah, they've got some live albums, and yeah, it all gets a little bit confusing. This is a new release, and it's a new release video review that I'm doing. I actually stumbled across this a few days ago. I hadn't realised that this was out. I was bizarrely enough looking for something that I know that Andy Tillison had wrote about a conversation about his favourite Tangerine Dream album, which I wanted to link into somebody's comment, because we've been talking about different favourite albums of a particular band. So this came out in May. So we're now just into July. In fact, today is the 1st of July as I record this. So most of the reviews on this channel are of the 3,000 greatest albums of all time, according to a list at acclaimedmusic.com, which is a list that has some right to claim this, in that it's been made by amalgamating critic lists from many years and from many forums, and basically it's a kind of more longitudinal version of Metacritic. So I set up this channel to review those, and I occasionally step off that. I'm just over a quarter of the way through on my main list. But finding out that this album existed gave me an excuse to step off the list and do a new release review, which is I occasionally do. So I have to say, I've been a Tangent fan since, it feels like a long time. They're not a particularly well-known band, I think, although if you're kind of in that echo chamber of prog, then they've made a reasonable amount of a splash inside there. They're now fronted by Tillison, and this album is actually a solo-made album, and it's billed officially as The Tangent Has One. And when I say a solo-made album, basically he's played everything, he's written everything, he's composed everything, he's mixed everything, he's produced everything, he's even done the artwork for the cover. And he fancied a challenge. It's not that he doesn't like his bandmates, he says. It's because he just fancied to go at this, and I'm guessing that other people were busy. So what I'm going to try and do in the most of this review is actually not be not kind of forever be mentioning all the other Tangent albums, and to try and do this as an isolated review, which is what I do for everything. So what is this album in itself as a listening experience? But I will at the end, kind of flash forwards, I will do a few seconds that are specifically for anyone who happens to be a Tangent fan who's stumbled on here and want to know what I think about this compared with previous Tangent albums. So musically, this is prog rock. Really not gonna challenge that in any way. I would say it's prog rock of a Flower King's mold. I feel like there is now, and has been for 15, 20 years or so, this kind of um, uh, feel that a lot of prog has. Actually, maybe there's two feels really here. There's the kind of Flower Kings mold, and then there's maybe the Riverside mold, or the Dream Theater mold, which is kind of prog metal, which has come into its own. I I am fond of saying that uh, prog rock these days is not progressive, in that it's not pushing the boundaries. It's basically settled down to be the thing that it is, but I still really enjoy it. And it's great for me. It's got unusual song structures or complex song structures. There's more longer songs in here. There's a lot of kind of switching and changing of feels and sounds and instruments. Sometimes there's some complex rhythms going on. There's fairly often uh, complex harmonies going on, and there's an overall kind of intelligent complexity to it. And that's so that generically, I'd say that that's the case for a lot of the prog. A lot of it I really enjoy. Sometimes it might be kind of hard to pick one out from the background of here. It is a major achievement, given that he's done it all himself. It sounds, polished. It sounds like it does have a kind of reasonably band feel to it. Now I understand from the stuff that I've read that nothing here is programmed, so that probably adds to the band feel. Given how complex some of this stuff is, I think that's a great achievement. I occasionally wonder, because I know he's a keyboard player and is an incredibly accomplished keyboard player, but he's playing drums, he's playing bass, he's playing guitars, and other things as well in here. And the guitar playing is decent. Everything else, the drums are very solid. I would say so. It does sound, like it's been produced by a band. And if I hadn't known from my reading that it was a solo effort, I would probably been convinced that it wasn't. Um, it's got all the kind of prog staples of shifting feel, kind of constantly changing. You do a section of this and a section of that and a section of the other, and you keep moving on. It has more of a tendency to do choruses and hook lines than some rock does. And it has, reasonably extended passages of fairly straightforward rock stuff. There's two or three tracks on here that are actually more accessible than a lot of prog is, because it's just more straight on rock. And there's occasional nods to the modern world of music, with for example, like the trap opening of the North Sky, and there's occasionally a kind of hint of autotune in here. Yeah, I don't feel it's detrimental, and it's not overly in your face. I really hate in your face autotune. Um, so let's talk about the songs, which is actually, having said all that about the music, the thing that I really like here is the songs, and this has always been the case with the Tangent stuff, and especially the stuff that Andy Tillison's written. So I would describe him as an eccentric person from Leeds, and I feel like maybe I have to be careful, because there's a faint chance that he's going to see this review. Hi, Andy, if you're there. I do like what you do. And so I confess that I am going to email the band at the website and see if I can let them know that I've got a review of their album. Most of the songs, no, let's kind of pare back a little. He does story songs mostly, some of them with ongoing references back, and he's not ashamed or afraid, I would say, to say something meaningful in his songs. And I feel like that's really rare in prog. I mean, it's really rare in music in general. But this is why I would lift the Tangent above other prog bands. So I love the music, but then he's got something to say, which is great. So into specifically this album, it needs to be listened, I think, in the correct order. It's not one to put on shuffle. Um, and I am going to actually kind of very quickly describe each of the tracks here. So the North Sky bookends it, which is a positive, upbeat, if somewhat vague message. There's a short little pop of the North Sky appears. I think it's at the end of the anachronism track as well. And then between those two bookends, we've got A Like in the Darkness, which is, I mean, all these songs are kind of about several things, but there is a focus on them. And I think the Like in the Darkness is about the triviality of browsing and the search for likes, but also how easy it is to waste time just scrolling through stuff and looking at. The fine line, certainly at one point in the line, there's a fine line between truth and media. And I think it is pretty much about perspectives and spin and the way different, uh, how the news is presented in different ways by different people. The Anachronism is my favourite song here, and the timing of me finding this, and I presume the timing of him releasing this, is by no means coincidental, given that this is about general election in the UK. And we're Monday, and on Thursday this week, we're having a general election. So it's come out beautifully in time for this, and I've discovered it just in time. And it's all about the inadequacy of a two-party single-vote election system. There's some really biting one-liners in it. So just one example is something along the lines of, it doesn't matter who you vote for because they won't look like you. And there were points in it that I really made me think about the electoral system we have. I'm not a huge fan. I think that we've got some big problems with it. And there were actually a couple of points that made me like tear up slightly because it was so profound with it. Moving on, the single is, among other things, about living in an information echo chamber, which is something that I think is um, a really important message that needs to be talked about these days. And then it finishes up with the radio edges of the night sky. So normally I don't like having more versions of the same song on as extra edits. Actually, in this case, I think it works well because it bookends the album nicely. And it gives it context. It felt like quite a short album, but when I kind of totted it all up, it's actually not far short of an hour, I think. And I love it. It's a great album. It's a great marriage of content and music. It's thematically really interesting, and it says things that made me think, and says things that I would like to express. And so maybe the reason why I like the Tangent so much is because I agree with Andy on so many things about what he says, and he does make me think. So I promised stuff for Tangent fans. Obviously, this is from my perspective. I'd love to know what you think if you've come across this and about previous albums. So you might know some of the other albums better than I do. I know some of the earlier albums better than some of the later ones, I think. When I started listening to this, I was initially skeptical. Well, I was initially skeptical when I realised it was a solo effort, but actually it's really strong. I could probably convince myself that it does lose a little from the lack of the others being here, especially Jonas, but possibly only because I actually knew, and it may be that if I hadn't known, that I wouldn't have guessed. It really doesn't sound like a solo effort in that sense, and I'm really impressed with his musicianship. It's great. It has a real focus, so thematically it's more focused than any other Tangent album that I've come across. It's almost a concept album, and it works as a package. And I'm not saying that the other albums of theirs aren't great, and I do love them, but I think this has a thematic strength that that the previous albums haven't quite reached in the same way. Initially, I was less taken with the North Sky, actually, the first track, because it sounds more kind of generic positivity, quite like yes stuff. But now, kind of in retrospect, I feel like it fit. Um, The Anachronism, as I said, is my favourite track on the album. It's also the longest track on the album. And it's as insightful a piece of songwriting as I've ever heard, I think. So nice one, Andy, if you're watching this. Well done. So that's what I think. As always, I'd love to know what you think. So please do weigh in the comments. And that's it from me for now.
We haven't got options. We haven't got answers. We haven't got nothing that'll make a difference to our life. But we gave them power.